It's worth noting at this point that some people like to put fish into the recipe at this stage. Sometimes canned salmon, sometimes tuna. Don't do it, don't do it, don't do it.
Hello and welcome to the Fresh Air Sci-Fi Show. I'm Joe.
And I'm Dave.
And today we are going to be having a discussion about art. And not only just discussing art, but actually discussing the concept of art and what is art. And Dave has very kindly created a presentation for us. So it's a little slideshow that we'll be going through. Now, I'll be doing my best to keep my eye on the chat and any questions that come through. I'll happily interrupt Dave because you know I like doing that anyway, completely throwing him off of his game.
Well, you know, it makes sure I know what I'm talking about rather than just repeating a script from memory.
And at one point, you know, one day I am going to get Dave so annoyed that he just quits the stream, right?
Okay, bye.
But yeah, so we've got that for you. And but before we start that, I just wanted to remind you all that we have been starting to release our responses to the questions for theists and questions for atheists every Tuesday from at around 9 p.m. We are going to be releasing the next video. So far we have released 2 of the questions for theists and 1 of the questions for atheists, and we've got the next one coming up on Tuesday at 9 p.m. That doesn't mean that it's too late to submit your answers. We may have recorded answers to roughly the first 5 of each, but we will still happily add you in if you've got some good answers for the rest of them. And not only that, if we get enough answers that are completely different, right, we will more than happily add those in and in fact do an entire second wave of answers. We're still looking for a lot of answers from Muslims and Hindus and other forms of polytheist. So if you can get a video response and tag it under the video, we would very, very, very much love you to do that. Hello, Jeff and Twisted. Nice to see you. And Kimmo as well. Great to have you all here right at the start. So as there's a few of you here already, I am going to put things into Be Right Back briefly so that Dave can get his presentation up. And if you've just joined in, we're having a discussion on what is art. And we're back. Sorry that took a little bit longer than expected. We did
Dave
have
is terrible with Discord.
Yeah, I was just telling people in the chat. Yeah, we did a test beforehand, and everything seemed to be working fine. And what happens when you go live? Yeah, it stops working. But yeah, it is working. So tonight is Dave's presentation, and so it is what is art, and this is the moment where I should shut up, but I'm just annoying him that little bit longer.
I'm too zen to be annoyed. I haven't got enough hair to be annoyed. All the heat escapes out the top of the head immediately.
That's the secret to Zen. Is that why all monks actually have a shaved head? Oh my god, Dave's just worked it out. Dave has sold monkism.
Monkeyism? Oh no, those are NFTs. Okay, so you mentioned last week you wanted to do a stream on aesthetics, so I thought I would throw this one together because it's a pretty basic question when it comes to aesthetics. You know, how do we define art? And it seems like a simple enough concept, doesn't it? You just point to something and you go, that's art. But the question is, what makes it art? How would you actually define when something is an artwork? And most people would be like, well, why should I care? You can think of something like Nietzsche says, art is something that adds value to our lives. It helps us learn to create our own value. So, you know, like in the sense of when we kill off God, we start to need to create our own values. Art can help us figure out how to create beauty and how to create value.
It's actually quite funny that this topic came up because yesterday, I think it was, there was a meeting at a company I may or may not work for, and they claimed that the new logo should be considered art, and I was just like, what about that speaks to art at all? So I'm hoping in this stream that there's an answer of how we can actually consider it art, at least above, well, I just think it is.
See, you should have said, can you wait till tomorrow? We're actually having a discussion about this later. Can you not just wait one day? Okay, so like I said, it might seem obvious to us. I should have skipped to this slide, but, you know, it might seem obvious to us because we're surrounded by things that are called art and whatnot. So let's just have a look at a few examples of some artwork. This is a painting from Norman Rockwell, who we all know was a painter in America, and he sort of captured American life. Would you call this art?
Yeah. And side note, my friend, when I was growing up, his dad owned the restaurant Rockwell's. So there you go.
Okay, nice one. And it sort of fits in with rock theism.
Yeah.
It's the belief that Norman Rockwell is an art god.
What would Elmo say to that?
Well, we're not talking rocks, we're talking Rockwells. Okay, so you call it art, but why would you call it art?
So I would say that there is a large degree of skill. There is something captured of reality and depicted in an incredibly realistic way for this particular thing as well. And I'm not saying that everything necessarily needs to be realistic. There is certain things that it can evoke in a person as well. There's certain things that you can get from this situation. And yeah, I mean, the main thing that I would say from it is the degree of skill that has gone into it to, replicate something that is real.
Yeah, to faithfully imitate nature, so to speak. And it sort of tells a little story and gets the senses, hits them in the right way, that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Okay, what about this one? This is graffiti found on a wall, and it was created by Banksy. Would you consider this art? And if so, what makes it art?
I would. Again, especially because it's emotive. Again, it's depicting something from reality. If it was just the text, then I'd say no, because that's just writing on a wall. It may be equally emotive. It may still, have a point. Not necessarily this quote, but some things written on a wall might make a point. But on its own, it's not like a piece of poetry, the text, that is. This piece of text requires the image next to it.
It gives it a little bit more power and a little bit more aesthetic.
Yes.
Okay. How about this next one? This was a piece known as My Bed, and it's from the artist Tracy Emin. It was displayed at the Tate Gallery in like a main exhibit, and it sold at auction for just over £2 million. Would you consider that art?
Me personally, no. That's how I used to live.
Yep. But now think back to the first picture.
It replicating reality.
It replicated life, yeah.
But what skill has gone into that? Oh, I just haven't made my bed. I've left some shit on the floor. They haven't actually, crafted the bed themselves. They haven't painted the bed themselves. They've just got a bed and made it poorly, and they've just dropped some shit on the floor. So yes, they're replicating a scene from life, but I understand this is considered art. You're asking me if I would consider it art, and the answer is
that's
no.
Yeah.
There is a difference there. I do understand that there are people who consider it art. I would just say, no, it's not. It lacks some of the qualities of something that I would actually call art.
Yeah. Okay, that's fair enough. Okay. So they are literally all considered art, though. You might not consider them art. But they are all considered art to some degree. And there is nothing really that sort of connects them. As we could see, there was the image in the Rockwell painting kind of captured a moment in time. It had a nostalgic feeling. It evoked certain emotions. There was skill, like you said. The Banksy one, that sort of had the same. It had an aesthetic quality to it. It passed on a kind of narrative. It took skill because, he had to create the stencils. He had to choose the right colors. He had to do it kind of undercover, so to speak. But the Tracy Emin one is still considered art. You might not consider it art, but in the art world, it was obviously considered a very good piece, and it sold for a lot of money.
I mean, some people are just wrong.
Oh yeah, I agree. So it doesn't seem to be that there's any particular thing that runs through all of them to be considered art.
Agreed. It's probably a case of there are certain qualities, and if they hit enough of these particular qualities, then it can be regarded as art. So we've actually had a couple of comments come in that should be addressed before we move on. So Casual Philosophy says, but writing can be art. Aren't novels, literature a form of art? Yes, I completely agree. So I would say like a poem or a novel or anything like that are definitely a form of art. What I was saying about the Banksy piece is is those particular words on their own were not enough to be regarded as art. They needed the image for the whole thing to be regarded as art. I wouldn't have said the image necessarily needed the words, though. It just gave it more power. But I definitely agree, writing can be art. How do we distinguish art from mere craft? I mean, that's...
See, I've already thought of that one, and it's...
Is it coming later?
Discussing it later on.
Okay,
yeah.
So that one's coming up later, and if you want an answer, you're going to have to wait. Twisted says his with Wittgenstein in this, so we'll leave that because Dave may come to that later. If not,
I definitely am, along with Bear Scout.
Casual Philosophy says as well, the concept of art does seem to contain an element of praise. And I think you're right, at least with evoking an emotion at the very least. And there probably would be at least one person that praises that evocation of an emotion. So you could be very much right there. He also says, they also say, you have to look beyond intrinsic or inherent properties and to relational properties, how something fits into a network of other things considered art, artists' intentions, institutions, etc. And I think that would be correct. And Twisted also says there seems no essence of art, yet it seems to have rules. A bit like morality. Twisted, I hope you join us at some point. We're going to have a sort of a free-for-all roundtable discussion on morality. Daniel Kelly says, I can't remember who said it, but I liked the definition. Art is whatever someone has done simply to make another's life more interesting. And Kimmo says... if a can of Piero Manzoni's feces sold for 124,000 euros, I guess an unmade bed's got to be worth even more. Brilliant. Okay, so there we go. We're caught up with all the messages, Dave. Please continue.
Nice one. Okay, so like any other topic in philosophy, like Twisted says, morality has similar kind of features. There's lots of theories about what makes something art. And there's kind of three traditional theories. These go back. There's modern theories to come, but these are sort of old theories from like Plato and Aristotle and stuff. And the first theory is art as a copy of nature. So, Plato likened art to a mirror, and the art reflects the world around us back to us. So, a tragedy will reflect the life of a tragic person or a tragic story back to us. A sculpture kind of reflects a moment in time back to us and captures how a person looks or what have you. And Aristotle kind of likened it to history tries to describe what actually has happened, whereas art is more about describing possibilities, what could happen, kind of reflects moral virtues back at us, that kind of thing.
The science fiction is basically art under this description.
Yeah, and what they're mostly talking about are poetry and that kind of textual narrative art or a play or what have you. Plato didn't really like poets and actors. He saw them as people that bewitched other people because it got them caught up in a story and made them believe things were real that weren't actually real. If you think back to our discussion about fictional emotions.
Yeah. The horror of it all and all of that.
Yeah, yeah. So there could be said that there's a couple of things here. Art doesn't necessarily imitate life. You can think of something like, what's his name? The guy who did the chicken soups. Andy Warhol. He stacked up a pile of Brillo boxes, like remade them, covered them in labels, and called them art. That's imitating life. But now think of something like Salvador Dali's watches. That doesn't necessarily imitate life. It's not reflecting life back at us.
Unless you're on acid.
Yeah, very true. And he most likely was. But art doesn't necessarily have to imitate life. It's just, it can. That's one of the things, like the Norman Rockwell painting. And I guess you could say Tracy Emin's bed imitates life because it's an imitation of her bed. But like you said, you wouldn't consider that to be art. So
no, I think there has to be a bit of skill.
Yeah. So there are other conditions that we can think of, like necessary conditions that go into making something art. Like you said, skill. A skilled writer comes much closer to being considered art. Dostoevsky is Tolstoy, even, is more artistic than the Turf Woman. J.K. Rowling. Yeah, there's like a huge difference there in the quality of writing and stuff.
Yeah, I mean, you could do the same with certain like TV and films, couldn't you? There's some that are just entertainment and others that are really artistic.
Exactly. And if you think about music, like think of the Moonlight Sonata, it's a beautiful bit of music and it's a beautiful bit of art, but it doesn't necessarily imitate a night in the moonlight. So it's not a necessary condition, but it's a possible condition, we could say. Oscar Wilde kind of described art as something that's beautiful. The artist is the creator of beautiful things. So this would mean that works of art are kind of anything considered beautiful could be considered a work of art if they are created by artists. But now think of something like a cubist picture. It's not necessarily beautiful. Or think of, again, the fictional emotions like horror and tragedy. I'm not sure that you would consider them beautiful as such.
Yeah, it depends on how you're defining beauty there, isn't it? I mean, you could use beauty as in something that represents the genre to the best of the ability. So, like, we could say a horror is beautiful because it really, ticks the boxes of what is a horror, but it's not necessarily what most people think of when they say beauty. Most people think of the subjective
speak of a feeling
beauty.
of awe or
yes.
Yeah. So it seems like that isn't really a fulfilling definition. It might be an old, classic definition, but it doesn't quite capture what we mean when we say art. Because think about Napalm Death. You could consider that art. Play a whole song in 6 seconds with growling and grungy noises. Some people consider that kind of horrible, but it still takes some skill to create something like that. Okay, so tools. You okay?
Yeah, no. You seem to suddenly freeze up for a sec.
I think it was because I was swapping windows.
Ah, fair.
Still
before you move on,
pop-out window.
Lone Wolf has just said, Keep in mind also, to Oscar Wilde, tragedy was a form of beauty. He captured this type of beauty well in his works. So, I mean, that is sort of along the lines of what we were saying. You know, there is a certain beauty of fulfilling the parameters of a genre. So, you know, there is still life that fits the parameters of still life is beautiful still life. And even though I might not regard certain bits of especially like abstract art, like necessarily that beautiful, under the parameters of what is supposed to be abstract art, you can still say that that is good abstract art. So therefore, you could say it's a form of beauty. It's a beautiful form of abstract art, even if I don't find it beautiful myself. So that's basically what you're saying there. Oscar Wilde, you know, found tragedy beautiful, and yeah,
he actually found a beauty in the feeling that tragedy gave him.
And you could say the same for people who like horror and other things, couldn't you, Dave?
Yeah.
And actually, before we move on, Daniel Kelly says, maybe horror could be art, but if we embrace it as sublime rather than beautiful. And that was one of the points that you brought up in our conversation about, it wasn't the horror of it all, it was in Can Beauty Be Objective?
Yeah. It was discussing Kendall Walton. So Tolstoy argued that art is a form of communication.
Lone Wolf says, wait a second, is this whole show a roundabout way of making the case that this show is art?
Well, it covers tragedy, communication. Joe's got the beauty part, I've got the horrific part. So, you know, it's art. Look, there's even, like, paintings, like, in a gallery.
Oh, yeah, no, there are, look, yeah. There's the Joker over there. We've got Dragon Ball Z at the back there. We've got a Stormtrooper there. There's a Banksy.
And I've got the School of Athens.
I've even got a Banksy in the back. Yeah, you've got all the books and everything like that. I mean, look at that. Yeah, there's art.
Art.
Oh, well
all
played,
carefully sculpted like an unmade bed.
You worked out the purpose of this show before we did.
Now, see, if he's an art critic, he can bestow upon us the property of art. That's one theory that's coming up later.
So, sorry, Dave, please continue.
That's all right. Yeah. For Tolstoy, art was a means of communication. So one of the things that makes art is that it communicates some kind of idea or emotion or feeling. It brings about an experience that we can then feel through the art that the artist communicates to us. Think of the Banksy thing. It sort of communicates an idea, you know, be rebellious, rage against the machine, fight against the power, all that kind of stuff. And you could say in some ways that Rockwell's painting communicates an idea too. The idea of American life back then and the wholesomeness of it and, you know, a certain moment in time, and it captures this little bit of nostalgia. But does all art have to communicate something? Look at Tracy Emin's bed. That doesn't necessarily communicate anything except she was a bit lazy in creating art. She couldn't be bothered to make a bed. She probably had a deadline due like a terrible student like me does and thought, oh, fuck it, I'll just send him whatever I've got.
Yeah. I mean, I think people could add a layer to it. You know, it could be this is what student life is like, or this is what life is like for the people who are working minimum wage.
This is what an artist's life is like.
Yeah. So they could be things communicated by it. I still don't think it should be regarded as art, but you know, I can put my hat on like I used to have to do when we were doing English literature. Yeah, analyze these poems. Oh, off.
Poems can be kind of interesting in that way.
Oh, they can, but the ones that we had to analyze weren't.
No. But, you know, most art does have some kind of communication involved in it. A communication of an experience or an emotion, or a message or something like that. But it doesn't... There are examples of art where it doesn't necessarily exist intrinsically to the artwork. Like if you think of Tracy Emin's bed, it's not intrinsic in the artwork. It's in the artist who creates it that creates the expression. It's through the artist rather than through the medium.
Through the person that is perceiving the art, perhaps. You know, I gave a story to it. You know, that might not be the story, but I gave a story to that piece of art. And you could say the same even more for some really abstract pieces of art. You know, someone might have just put it together and thought, that looks kind of neat. And that might be their story. That's why they did it. They liked the way it looked. But someone might go, oh, yeah, this evokes this and a memory of blah-de-blah. And, oh, look at this desolate space. And, you know, so someone could actually add a communique that isn't even there in the actual art.
Absolutely. And now think of something like a letter you wrote to your grandparents as a child, telling about how much you were enjoying a holiday. That communicates something. It communicates a bit of a tale, communicates some emotions, communicates an experience. But would you call that art?
It's in the same ballpark as that bed.
Yeah. So it seems that even with these might be conditions of art, but they're neither necessary nor sufficient. There is other things that we have to take into consideration when it comes to what makes something an artwork. Like you said in the beginning, skill, the aesthetic experience, and this goes for film, music, sculpture, painting, literature, anything like that.
Mm.
So these three attempts to capture it don't quite capture what art is. They capture elements of art.
No, I agree there. I think so far it's almost been like theories of knowledge or theories of truth. They're almost capturing part of what something is to be knowledge, or part of something that is to be true, and not necessarily capturing the entirety of what is art.
Yeah.
We have a quick one from Kimo just before we continue. He says, I like Joyce Carey's idea when he says that art will involve a discovery or a previously unrealized aspect of the actual world. On you frozen, Dave. So I've got no way of finding out your particular opinion on this because you're gone. Although, you know, if anyone has Discord Nitro, we've just actually got a 3 months free. So by next stream, hopefully we're hoping to get around this issue because we're hoping we'll have higher priority in the Discord servers. But if anyone wants to give us a server boost at the same time, because you've got them spare, don't do it. Don't actually go out of your way to pay for it. I'm just saying if you've got them there and you've got no one to give them to. But yeah, he's still not coming back, is he? So Casual Philosophy says, does having an eye count as skill, like the ability to identify what would be art so you can then transport or copy it and display it as art? This seems to be part of photography as art. I like that. Actually, oh God, yeah, Dave's disconnected. But I will quickly switch things, and we will be back in a second. Yes, no, I like what you say there, Casual Philosophy. I think it definitely counts as a skill. I think someone having that ability to point something out as art, in the same way that I think if you recognize someone as a good communicator, or if you recognize someone having good programming skills or anything like that, like the ability to quickly pick up on someone, like you have scouts, you have football scouts, or any sort of sport scouts. Yeah, I would say that is definitely a skill, having that idea to pick it up. And in the same way that you could see, say, someone who, oh yeah, they're really really good at football, you know, and pick that up. Uh, you could have someone who goes, oh yeah, no, that's clearly art. And Dave did mention that later on we're going to have that conversation about how there are art critics. There are people who are highly skilled at picking out what art is. So there is an argument that art critics are people who can pick out art, just as there are people who are good at identifying, oh yeah, you're a good footballer, so you're going to be one. So quickly switching that back into the screen share. There we go.
Sorry about that.
That's okay. I think I managed to blag it long enough. Thankfully, there were a couple of questions that came in.
No, I don't know why Discord keeps doing that to me.
No,
just boots me out and then sits there going connecting.
No, I mean, I tell you what. We from next week we've got the Nitro thing to try out, and if that doesn't make it any better, I reckon we switch to trying Google Meet or anything like that. Lone Wolf says has a boost. Oh, thank you very much.
Oh, nice one. Okay.
Yeah, so hopefully that, you know, once we trial out having the boosts there, it'll increase stability and
it'll help with something. I mean, it was going so well until then.
The thing is, it isn't either of our connections. I know I host the main chat, and it's definitely not my connection because I've got 500 up and down. It's not your connection either. I know that, you know, you don't have an out-of-the-world connection, but you always have quite a low ping to the Discord servers and everything like that. And it just seems to be that it wants to screw you over.
It's like everyone else in the world, and it hates me.
But thank you very much for that, Lone Wolf.
Yeah, nice one. Thank you. Okay, so T.S. Eliot is a poet, of course. He argued that Tolstoy's view makes art just a little bit too subjective. Like, the message that we take from it can be very subjective, very personal. And the message put forward is personal to the artist, according to Tolstoy. The message that he's trying to convey, the emotions that he's trying to convey, because he's saying that it's the artist trying to convey an experience that they have and trying to pass it on to somebody else so that they can perceive that experience.
Yeah, and I suppose the person could experience something different, couldn't they? You know, two people could look at the same thing. Like, the artist is trying to convey X, person Y loves it, but because they experienced something completely different to what they were trying to convey in the first place.
Yeah, exactly. And it's kind of hard. Our inner experiences are sort of ineffable. We can describe them, but we can never truly pass it on. I can tell you what I think a curry smells like. And I could probably describe it to some accuracy, but that will never truly let you know what a curry smells like until you smell it.
Yeah, I mean, you're almost getting into qualia there, aren't you?
Exactly. So for Eliot, it was using emotions, ordinary emotions, to express feelings. The point is to transcend the artist. Oops, sorry, I was just reading the chat. it's to express feelings, not emotions, but to put people into a particular situation and give them a look into the personality of the artist, so to speak.
So on that, from the chat, Lone Wolf actually says, someday afternoons will be measured with coffee spoons and T.S. Eliot.
Yeah.
Casual Philosophy says, though, I don't think communication is just from artist to person. I think we use art to communicate with each other. Part of the enjoyment of art is finding shared experiences with others. And I'd completely agree with that. What about you, Dave?
I would, but Tolstoy wouldn't. Like, Tolstoy didn't even consider his own works to be art, as he put...
Oh, he's gone again. Dave's gone again.
Mistaken.
Did you forget to connect to your VPN first today, Dave?
Hello?
Yes, you're back.
I did. Okay. Yeah, I've not connected to the VPN, sorry.
Yeah, it's a really odd thing, actually, right? Everybody knows. I mean, everybody knows, right? I mean, Kimo's put up a thing about theories of knowledge. Everybody knows that a VPN will slow down your connection because you're putting another link in the chain, right? So it should cause more problems. Everyone, except for Dave, who, when he connects to a VPN, has a more stable connection to Discord.
Yeah, I don't understand that one either. It shouldn't be possible, but that seems to be how it works.
There's clearly something in Dave's ISP that just doesn't like Discord.
I mean, it's possible.
Speaking of Kimo, he also says, Elliot can have the afternoons as long as I can keep the glory of Wallace Stevens' Sunday morning.
Yeah, unfortunately, I'm not familiar with that one. But to go back to Casual Philosophy's point, because I'm guessing you didn't hear me responding to that one.
No, I'll bring that one back up on screen and you can respond again.
Yeah, I agree with him that it's not just communication from artist to person. It's communication amongst each other. You know, when we look at a piece of art together, we can sort of share our experience of that art and what we find pleasing. But Tolstoy didn't consider that. It was a very specific form of communication, and Tolstoy didn't even consider his own works to be works of art. He dismissed them as works of art because they failed to meet the standard that he set. As he stated, he was mistaken in his youth and didn't really understand what art was when he wrote those books.
Yet they are considered art in general.
Yeah. So, you know, he was probably just being a bit harsh on himself. Perfectionist, yeah. I guess. Okay. And now we have one that Lone Wolf mentioned earlier, the Urinal. Now, this is something akin to Tracy Emin's work. This could be considered what's known as seriously weird art.
You're saying it's piss poor?
Something like that. Well, I mean, it's upside down for a start. So he submitted this to an art thing, an art exhibition in 1917. All it was the standard urinal that you find in public toilets. He signed it, not even in his own name, and paid the fee, and it had to be displayed. It wasn't displayed in the main thing. It was put away somewhere shameful. But he did it to show that anything can be art if the art world accepts it as art.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a comment from Casual Philosophy here that is very relevant. This is where the I as skill comes in. Seeing that displaying this as a work of art would be suitably evocative and transgressive at that particular time.
Yes, exactly. And that was his intent, to show that, art doesn't belong to the art world. The art world can bestow upon it a property of art, but that doesn't necessarily mean that it is art. Because it's, unless you're going to call a public urinal art, I mean, I suppose you can. But that was his point. It was a sort of, not a protest, but a criticism of art critics in the art world of the time. That it's not up to them to decide what is art. There is more to art than simply the art world saying, okay, that's art.
Sorry, Twisted has made me giggle. I piss on your art. I don't know why I see that in a French accent. I know he's Welsh, but I see that. I piss on your art in a French accent. And Kimmo has a much more sensible statement saying Duchamp's Trebuchet from the same year was probably more iconoclastic than provocative. Is that the word? Is that how you say it?
Iconoclastic.
Iconoclastic. I've not even heard that word before. I thought I had a good vocabulary, but, I know provocative, Dave. I'm not that dumb. I mean, I'm dumb, but I'm not that dumb.
I'm not saying nothing.
I don't know that one. Sorry. I'm not up on my art. I find aesthetics very interesting, but a lot of art doesn't pique my interest in the same way the actual concept and the discussion around what is art and what is beauty and stuff like that. I suppose I'm more of a wordy person.
Have I frozen again?
No.
Oh, no.
Well, you might have done.
Okay.
I was just chatting. But last comment as well. Lone Wolf says, well, in many cases, the point behind the piece is as important as the piece itself, like a robotic arm that cleans up its own leaking fluid over and over again. Interpretations are vast. And I think that you're right. I think that the point behind a piece is incredibly important. And that's why I sometimes find certain bits of art to be less good as art, because sometimes they seem, well, this looked nice. And that seems to be their justification for it. I thought it was all right. These couple of squares next to each other, I thought they worked together. Or, yeah, I couldn't really think of anything, so I just did a bed with, I put a joint on it. There you go, that's art. It seems to be a bit lazy. It's why I don't think that they're actually particularly good as art. But where you mentioned there, interpretations are vast, and you're right. I mean, I could even, if I wanted to, put a number of different interpretations on those pieces of art. It's one of the things that you had to do in school. I don't know if it is, but over here, when you're doing things like English and theatre studies and all of that, you have to analyse these poems and plays, and there's no wrong answer as long as you can justify why your answer is your answer. So with the poems, you can say, oh yeah, well, this onomatopoeia here and this alliteration there, and it represents this sort of thing there, and and all of a sudden you've got a good interpretation because you have an interpretation that is above just, yeah, well, I like it. And
yeah,
maybe that's part of something that is art, that you can have a serious interpretation of it, and the person had an intention. Do the intention and interpretation have to meet in the middle? Again, probably not. You'd hope that they would, but probably not. Anyway,
you can get from art what you need to get from art, yeah. And now, would you consider this art? It's making a statement. It's not the artwork itself that is the art. It's what he did to the art world that is the piece of art. Think of it like a performative art.
No, I still wouldn't regard it as art. I can understand the statement. But it's kind of like something that a philosopher submits that wasn't philosophy. You know, just to say, look at the state of philosophy, it needs to improve. This is something submitted by an artist saying, this is the state that art's got to, it needs to improve.
Think of artists previous to this, though, who submitted works that were rejected. People discredited them, said that's not art, like an impressionist painting or something like that. And then 5 years later, they're slowly rediscovered, and it's like, oh my God, this has changed the way we see art. And suddenly it becomes art. Has anything changed between the original painting and its acceptance into the art world? Why, wasn't it still art at the time?
I don't know. I need to think on it more. I don't have enough time to think on that one.
But yeah, that's the sort of statement that he was making. It's like, well, just because you accept it doesn't mean it's art, and just because you rejected something previously doesn't necessarily mean it wasn't art.
Yeah. So that almost goes against the statement that an art critic defines what is art.
Yeah, and that's the whole point, because that's what we're going to come up to in a second.
But again, I don't think making a statement necessarily makes it art. I think it makes something that could be a good statement, right? I think that, the fact that that was submitted as art and it's not art, and it's clearly not art as far as I'm concerned, and I don't think the person who submitted thought it was art, and it was in an art gallery and whatever, I still don't think it was art. But the statement is powerful. And I'm not saying the statement wasn't powerful. I'm saying it's not art, and it's just showing a flaw in art, in the same way that you could say there are problems in philosophy. Some people talk about the stagnation of philosophy and things like that. There are definitely problems in philosophy. There's definitely problems in science. There's problems in any area. Certain things get stuck. They definitely get stuck. And certain things are regarded maybe as philosophy or science that maybe shouldn't be.
Yeah. So there is stuff that, can make a statement. According to some of the things that came before it, there's a narrative behind it, not in the actual artwork itself, but in the whole process of the creation of the work of art. But it doesn't quite fit into any of those previous categories, but it is still considered art. So one way to solve all the previous problems is that the institutional theory of art was created in this with
Are you back, Dave?
Can you hear me?
Yeah, you're back. You're on like a proper roll there, and then
I'm sorry. I'm not sure what's going on tonight.
It's actually the worst it's been for a while, isn't it?
Yeah, because when we were recording the other night, it was fine for about 3 hours, and then just when we were finishing, Okay, so one way to overcome all these problems of the previous one, where they never truly captured what a work of art is, was to create the institutional theory of art. And this was the kind of thing that Duchamp's work was protesting against. So the institutional theory of art argues that art is whatever is simply its social context. So if the art world has a consensus that this piece is a work of art, then it's a work of art. As long as it's, contemporary respected experts, et cetera, et cetera. So
there is a sort of an ad-populum going on there. And not necessarily a fallacious ad-populum, but there is an ad-populum going on there.
These people are experts in art. If they declare that it's a work of art, who are we to say that the experts are wrong if we're not trained to spot works of art, basically? But then we go... Oops, sorry.
No, I was just going to say, Lone Wolf said, look at the art that burns up at Burning Man every year. The point of the art is immediacy and the temporal nature of the art. I mean, which adds, I think that's a lot of power to that sort of art as well.
It does,
actually. Yeah.
And it passes on a message that everything is fleeting. All beauty is fleeting. That's one way you could read into that. Okay, so that was one theory of art, and that's sort of what Duchamp was protesting against. And do you know who Damien Hirst is?
Yeah, didn't he drive cars?
No. He chopped a whale in half. I think it was a whale.
Oh, the one who did the slices
it.
of the whale. The different slices of the whale. Yeah. Why do I think there's a Damien Hirst that drove Bugattis?
I mean, maybe I've got the name wrong.
No.
I'm pretty sure
there's
his name
more
was Damien
chance
Hirst.
that I've got things wrong than you, Dave. I mean, we know this, but why? I need to Google this. The only reason, I mean, sure it was Damien Hirst. I need to see if he owned a Bugatti. I'm just Googling now. The only... Oh no, so maybe. I don't know if it's the same Damien Hirst, right? But there is a Damien Hirst that sort of, according to Google, I've only done a quick scan. I haven't verified this in any great detail. So, I was talking about my friend who, his dad owned the restaurant Rockwell's, which obviously Norman Rockwell, so on and so forth. His godfather, I swear, was called Damien Hirst, and his son, he kept buying his son Bugattis, and his son kept on destroying them. But they were so rich it didn't matter. And there was something ridiculous like, only 8 of these in the world. I mean, this is a story I was told as a 9-year-old child, so it could be all complete bullshit. But I can definitely verify that his dad owned the Rockwell's restaurant. That's the bit that I can say is 100% true, at least at the time. But yeah.
Is the person you're thinking of Damien Hill? I think he was a race car driver.
No, Damien Hill was the one that was an F1 driver, wasn't he? For
Oh, okay. Yeah, I don't know much about those kind of things. It's just that name popped into my head.
Yeah. I don't know. Sorry, I'm,
That's all right.
I'm trying to drink through the pain of...
Damien Hill. Yeah, so some of Damien Hirst's artwork could be seen in this sort of sense. He was showing the kind of fickle nature of the art world. I mean, some of his stuff is really powerful, but some of his stuff could also be seen as trolling the art world as part of an artistic performance. Just to show that there are still these faults and artists keep protesting against them.
So would you say he's like, the Wittgenstein of art?
No. He's not that much of a genius.
Fair.
Okay, so John Kerry, who is kind of an art critic, he agrees that anything can be a work of art. It's not intrinsic properties to the object itself that make it a work of art. There's nothing inside the work, the work that makes it a work of art. What makes it a work of art is that someone... I just saw Foucault of art. What makes it a work of art is that someone thinks it's a work of art. So you don't think Tracy Emin's bed is a work of art. So to you, it's not a work of art. For the person who paid £2+ million for it, it's obviously a work of art for them. So what makes something a work of art is something about the experience for the individual.
So that's talking about an incredibly subjective take on art, isn't it?
Yeah.
I suppose there's nothing wrong with that inherently, really. There's just part of me that doesn't like it. It's like saying, well, yeah, I like heavy metal, but anything I decide is heavy metal. So therefore, me taking a piss outside and recording it is heavy metal and I like it. You know, surely there's got to be some sort of rules in place. You know, there's got to be something. And I don't think it has to tick all the boxes. It's like certain things you were saying earlier. You know, when we've had the discussion, you know, that there's the bit around skill. There's a bit about, you know, trying to communicate something. There's something about the artist's emotion. There's something about the person viewing the art's emotion. So on and so forth. All of these things, I think, need to actually be ticked. I don't think having a purely subjective take on art, me going, oh yeah, those blinds, yeah, right now they're art, right? I don't think that's enough. I don't think that is enough to say something's like, oh yeah, my hat is slightly tilted to one side, but actually that's quite artistic, yeah? Wasn't completely unintentional at all. I'm a proper artist, me. I've done that purposefully. My hat on my head right now, art. No. I just put a hat on.
I mean, it might tell us when somebody thinks something is a work of art, but it doesn't tell us why it's a work of art, just that the person deems it. It's this evaluative kind of experience to them. But if you pointed to a tree and said that tree is a work of art, would they then agree that it is a work of art? They would probably say something like, well, no, because it's not been created by an artist. Or it's, I suppose, if they're a believer in God, they might say, well, God created the tree, so therefore it could be considered a work of art. But for most people who say art is whatever you call it, even then, there are probably some implicit conditions that they don't think about. Do you see what I mean?
Yeah, no, I definitely do.
But, you know, an individual thinking of something is a work of art does actually infer that it is a work of art to them. There's a certain aesthetic feeling that they get from it that makes them deem a work of art.
But is that any more, like, good than moral subjectivism?
Yeah. I mean,
I feel like this is moral behavior. I feel like this is a work of art.
If you think of something like, you know, you go down the pub and you're with your mates and somebody's been working all day, say a machinist or, you know, something like that. You all sit down, he grabs his pint and he drinks it and he goes, now that's a pint. I mean, he's not really said anything other than, I'm enjoying that.
Yeah.
Yeah, or like, now that's what I call a curry. How can you tell I had curry last night?
Yeah, no, that's fair. I mean, I would infer from what he's saying there is that pint tastes really good for whatever
it's a
reason.
Wonderful experience.
Yeah.
I'm really enjoying this one.
He's not tasting it as a dirty pint. It doesn't taste like there's loads of line cleaner in there, and he's probably a little bit thirsty for whatever reason. He's a bit stressed, and the experience, the relief he's getting on it. So not only is it a decent pint in the sense that it's not dirty and nasty and filled with other shit, he's in a state right now where that pint is exactly what he needs to fulfill that requirement.
Yeah, and the same with food, or now that's a bong, you know.
Yeah.
I've had a good hit. It tastes good. Yeah. So even from that, we can infer that it's not just because they call it a work of art that makes it a work of art. It's particular properties, particular aesthetic properties that it invokes in them that makes them described as art. So perhaps that's what a work of art is. It invokes kind of particular awe-inspiring, enthusiastic kind of emotions in somebody. It's an experience. It's not properties, but it's the experience of what's happening. But even then, it doesn't seem to work for me because, you know, if you say, now that's a pint, well, yeah, okay, but that's not what makes it a pint. There are other properties within that makes it a pint. Hops, barley, you know, it's crafted well, all those kind of things.
Yeah, no, that's fair.
And now for Twisted's favorite.
Wittgenstein!
Wittgenstein, yeah. He took a slightly different approach.
I'd just like to say, not Wittgenstein, as how I used to pronounce his name before I heard anyone else say it.
It was close enough. Names are just what people call things.
Yeah, and actually, do you know, from Wittgenstein, if I did call him Wittgenstein, he'd probably be more okay with that than the average person, right?
So, for Wittgenstein, art isn't necessarily a set of necessary and sufficient conditions, and it isn't necessarily just the fact that somebody calls it art. So there are certain properties that something must have for it to be art. It must be skillfully made. It must be a product of the imagination. It must be created by humans, you know, stuff like that. But
oh no, you died, Dave.
You can you hear me?
Yeah, you're back.
Yeah. So, for Wittgenstein, there is no necessary and sufficient condition that could cover all genres of art or all pieces of art, because what makes music great is different to what makes a novel great. What makes a novel great is different to what makes a painting great. So they all are kind of based on family resemblances. So they're all crafted, they're all created to be art, they're all created to have specific experiential qualities. But it's sort of like a game. And, you know, this was his example, the paradigm of the game. If I said to you to define what a game is, could you give me a universal definition with necessary and sufficient conditions that would describe all games?
No, not all games. I think there are certain things that you'd find in most games. But I don't think they're necessarily present in all games. And I think there are... I mean, I actually like what he says here. And, you know, the whole family resemblance thing. It is... I mean, if you think about a family resemblance, you think about your kids or your aunt or your uncle or your great-grandfather. There are certain things there that show you that you're related to them, even if you don't completely look like them. Even if you mostly don't look like them at all, there's still things that make you go, yeah, no, you're still part of that family. You know, and it's one of those things. I mean... So an example of something that is not art, right? I cannot draw. I am not an artist in any way, shape or form. But sometimes when I am doing streams, I doodle, right? And I can't find... Believe it or not, I had one that I thought was good. But stuff like this, right? I wouldn't regard that as art, right? It's just random doodles. I mean, there's even something that vaguely looks like Bart Simpson down in the bottom half, right? But none of that. I mean, I do it all the time.
I'm sorry I bore you that much.
No. It's not. It's because I'm trying to concentrate. The more I try and concentrate, the more I doodle. It might be a weird thing. It's one of the things I found out about myself is if I can focus on one other thing, then I have more attention for the thing I'm trying to focus on. Maybe that's an ADHD thing. I don't know.
I do it with YouTube videos and music where I'll put something on in the background. And if I start to notice myself hearing those things, then I know I'm not focused enough.
That's
and they'll always drag my attention away, but then I'll know that I'm drifting and I go back to what I was doing.
That makes a lot of sense, yeah. But yeah, I think my point was there that like those are clearly things that are not art. They're just random little doodles, and I don't think anyone would ever call them art. But there's something that I've done, but they're not done with the intention of being art. They're not done with any artistic quality. I am not an artist. You know, the closest I've been to being an artist is when I used to act in plays. You know, and write my own plays and things like that. But I mean, we're going back 20 odd years. I am not an artist. I tried to be one and I failed.
So basically, what you're saying is you're Hitler.
No, I eat meat, and that is why I have not committed mass genocide. So I should probably catch up with some of the comments in the chat, actually. I do apologise.
There's still a bit more to say about Wittgenstein, but I'll do that after this, just in case.
So, Twisted says, I remember in the 90s, band KLF made £1 million off of a cheesy song, took it out the bank in cash and burned it. That's my artistic statement. So, I mean... That's a good point, actually. So it's along the lines of the Urinal thing. It was something that wasn't art, right? It was something that made money, and they're saying, fuck all of you for paying for this. And the statement that they made could have been considered art. The actual song probably wasn't art, right? I know
KLF were amazing.
But what they did there, that statement was artistic, right? The actual song, I don't know the song that you're actually talking about, but the song was just a cheesy piece of shit, right? It wasn't art. It was just stuff that people would buy. Kimo says, while I looked at a urinal in a new way, I think I might go into Dan Dennett's deeper deep category. I may be making a category error here. Do you know what he means there, Dave?
It's a statement that sounds deep, but really, that's basically how that is. I've frozen, haven't I?
You did, but you're back.
Am I back? Yeah. Yeah, a deepity for Daniel Dennett is sort of like a statement that sounds really profound, but has no actual real substance to it.
Fair, basically everything I ever say.
And me.
Twisted says, Welsh internet is run by sheep and they get tired.
Yep, I can actually agree to that because I can see the field of them.
Oh, I might be a bit behind with the chat. He also says, Shark was good, the thought of death in someone still living. I've got no clue what that was in relation to. Sorry, Twisted.
I think it was to do with Damien Hirst.
Fair. So, Kimo says, the Academy used to strongly support artists who painted women on swings in rose gardens until they were forced to frown on them to make room for new flavors, like Impressionism.
Like Impressionists. Yeah.
That's really interesting. And Daniel Kelly says, seeing the Tate Modern Damien Hirst's For the Love of God, a diamond-encrusted skull, was for me a really transcendent moment. It's really something. And I think that speaks to something within art, you know, as you say, a transcendent moment. It's that it's evoked a really strong emotion in you. And that's something that we sort of expect from art. But equally, we wouldn't necessarily say everything that evokes a strong emotion is art. You know, I've had, exes really, really evoke strong emotions in me. I wouldn't have called that art. But I do think it is a very strong component of art. And I do think that the ability to evoke a strong emotion in someone is a necessary component. And Sfrida, good to see you here. And I'm sorry, whoever you are, Russian person, I can't read what you're saying. And Sfrida says, art is what the artist says it is. Okay, but if I was actually an artist and I screwed up a piece of paper and threw it at you and said that was art, would that make it art?
But you're not an artist, as you've said.
No. Sharp. But if I was, and I did that, would that make it art? And genuine question, Dave. Like,
right, okay. I thought you were being rhetorical.
No. Question to you: If I was an artist and I screw up a piece of paper and threw it at you and said that's art, would that really be enough to make it art?
Not for me.
So,
unless it was the art of comedy and it was like a pie.
Yeah. And Sfrida, we have gone through those definitions, and there are some that would say that agree with you. You know, that an art is what an artist says it is, or an art is what an art critic says it is. But there has been talk, and there's something about art that it's a little bit more than that. Casual philosophy. I'm not sure what this is relating to, but not necessarily. They could be using it for tax purposes or money laundering. Maybe that was related to the previous
Tracy
comment.
Emin's bed. No, Tracy Emin's bed.
Oh, really?
I would imagine.
Yeah. They could be. Yeah. Sold for 2.2 million. Yeah. Drug money. Wasn't real art at all. They managed to clean 2 million off of that.
Knowing Tracy Emin, there was a lot of it that went into drugs.
So it's all a drug debt, actually. She made nothing. 350. That's all she got left. Kimo says, when the sheep run things, the customers get fleeced. Twisted says, well, what about the death of the artist, RE meaning? It almost doesn't matter. Perhaps there are objective standards to aesthetics, however. Here comes philosophy to confuse us again. You're right there. Like, the death of an artist often does raise the value of art, of their art. Even if you don't necessarily agree at the time that it's art, the fact that they're dead, it still raises the value of their work. And that's getting into economics, and it's all bullshit. Martin would hate me for saying that, wouldn't he?
He would.
But Martin, you're not here. You should be here. Get on here with us, and you can, give me the proverbial slap I deserve. It's a challenge to you. Lone Wolf says, there are lots of ways things become art too. There was a time that Roman street goodies were junk to most Romans on the street, but now 1,000 years later, Roman toys are considered Roman art. That's a good point, actually. So you're looking at historical artifacts can become art because they're things that will never be made again in the same way or the same form. They weren't art at the time.
Yeah, for us, they capture a moment in time and show us how somebody used to live and the kind of experiences they used to have. and gives us a connection to them through the way they portrayed things.
Yeah. That's a really, really good point. So what you're saying there actually is Rebecca Black's Friday could one day be considered art, because they're capturing a time when the entire world laughed at one of the worst productions ever, and it got put around the world and on YouTube, and my God. It's going to be considered art one day, isn't it, Dave?
No. I mean, yes. According to one theory, it already is art, which I'll come to later.
So Kimmo says, like the person that loves the Renoir painting he owns for 20 years and then discovers it's a forgery, suddenly thinks it's a crappy painting. That's a good point, right? I mean, it doesn't actually make it a crappy painting. It just means it's a copy. And does it being a copy mean it's not art if it's not the original piece? I mean, it could be considered kitsch to some idea because it's a reproduction meant for mass consumerism rather than the actual artwork of the artist. But the actual feeling it evokes could still be considered to be an aesthetic experience equivalent to the original in some ways. And Lone Wolf says, I think that's why they say art is in the eye of the beholder. You cannot intend to create art, but I could see your creation as art. I mean, I think you can still intend to create art. You could still have an artistic mindset and think you're going to fit in that variety. I think a lot of people who see themselves as artists are highly critical of their own work and will create 1,000 pieces that they will say are not art. And they can have a friend come round and they'll go, well, yeah, 900 of these 1,000 pieces are fucking amazing pieces of art. So it ties into what you're saying in the eye of the beholder. But the only bit I disagree with there is you cannot intend to create art. I think people can intend to create art but feel like they failed. Twisted says Wittgenstein would approve. I assume that was around me saying, calling him Wittgenstein. I hope so anyway. Kimmo says, per Hemingway, there's only 3 sports: mountaineering, auto racing, and bullfighting. The rest are games. There is that funny comment on sport, isn't there? It's a game until someone loses an eye, then it's a sport. Something like that. And you could say that. It's one of those things like, why is golf and snooker considered a sport? Pretty much every other sport requires extreme skill and risk of injury. And those two, I mean, what, golfer's elbow? Got a little sore bit here from playing snooker. Twisted says, unlike Socrates, who was terribly upset about not finding the essence of justice or piety, Wittgenstein seems happy without the analytic reference to the real world things. Twisted says, Dave, it was the Doctor Who theme song. It was pretty cool, actually.
Yeah, it was when they were called Doctor and the Time Lords.
Oh, was it? Brilliant.
KLF do you remember a song called 3 AM Eternal?
No. But if you played it to me, who knows? I'd have to hear it, Dave. Sorry. But you know. Lone Wolf, drugs make amazing art. Yeah. And you know what? Not only do they make amazing art, they make art amazing as well. So on both sides, from a moral point of view, could we say that we should encourage artists to take drugs because it makes their art better? And for people who like art, should we encourage them to take drugs as well because it makes their appreciation? Basically, should we just encourage everyone around the world to take drugs because it makes everything better?
Okay, Nietzsche.
You know, I'm glad you got the reference. I only got that reference because of you, but obviously I'm glad that you realised I was doing that. There's a few other comments that we should come to in a second, but I tell you what, I'm going to have to take a brief break and come back. I do apologise, but the combination of taking the pain medication I've had today and the amount of water it's encouraged me to drink, plus the wine I've had this evening, has made me need a 5-minute break. I do apologise. I'll be right back. Sorry about that.
It's all good.
Yeah, I do apologise though. Kimo says, many, not all critics, know the cost of everything and the value of nothing. It sounds like quite a deep statement. Sorry, what were you saying, Dave?
Oh yeah, sorry. It hadn't changed on YouTube yet.
Okay. Yeah, there's about a 10-second lag, I think. So yeah, that sounds like quite a deep statement, actually. Because value and cost are two different things. I mean, cost is a form of value. Obviously, it's essentially an instrumental value, whereas value they're using there is a preferential value, I'd say, an emotive value, not necessarily the same sort of value. But equally, there are other types of value as well, though I'm not necessarily sure most art would fulfill those, so probably irrelevant to pick up or bring up. Lone Wolf says something: without a consumer, art has no impact. Also, war changes what we see as art. Which I think is probably quite a good point. I don't necessarily think you need a consumer for art to have impact, because what Banksy does has impact, and Banksy is not looking for a consumer. There are pieces that have been turned into sellable pieces. But if you think about things like provocative bits of graffiti, they're still art and there is no consumer for them. Consumer in the sense of someone that is purchasing them. There is still someone to perceive them, though. So if you mean consumer in the sense of someone that will absorb them in some way, rather than consumer in the sense of someone that will purchase them, then I completely agree with you there. Without life, there is no value. So without someone to perceive the art, art has no value or impact, as you say. War changing what we see as art, though. Does it fully change what we see as art, or does it add a different dimension to art? I don't know, so that's a genuine question for you, and for you, Dave.
It would depend on what he means by war changes the way we perceive art. But yeah, I think it can, because if you think of an artist in a war-torn country, we look at that differently, creating beauty within something so ugly. Say a piece of art scratched into a post in a concentration camp. Will perceive that as a different kind of expression to somebody who just scratches their name in a tree.
That we will. In fact, even if it was the exact same thing, like the exact same thing inscribed in both circumstances, we'd see them differently.
The context of how the art was created and where it came about can affect the actual, not so much aesthetic properties, but the cognitive properties that we glean from the work of art.
Lone Wolf says, all Star Wars... It's not coming up. Why is it not coming up? There we go. All Star Wars toys could be art. Well, that's good, because they've got Star Wars pictures in the background, so we're in agreement. Kimo says that's the point. It seems to me of Keats' ode on a Grecian urn. I don't know what that relates to. Do you, Dave?
I'm not familiar with the piece now.
No. I do apologise, Kimo, but I'm far too ignorant for that one. I'm not above admitting my ignorance, so I hope you can appreciate that. Casual Philosophy says, this actually does happen in music. I've seen it in my lifetime. Stuff that is initially hated and disdained comes to be appreciated and lauded some 20 years later. And I think that happens in all forms of art. I think that happens, you know, I mean, you consider about the first people who were trying to get certain art pieces, you know, appreciated. It might not have been until they died and many years later they were suddenly thought of as amazing pieces of art. So it happens in all forms of art, not just music. Yeah, no, I agree with you. The question is it art? Right? I mean, if we can talk about, say, let's talk about a really basic, crappy TV show, right? That was hated 10 years ago, but is really enjoyed now. But we wouldn't regard it as art, right? It wouldn't be regarded as art. We've just realised that it had certain bits of subtext that we didn't realise. It's funny, it appeals to us, but it's not necessarily artistic in the way other TV shows would be regarded as artistic. So with certain bits of music, right, some of them were incredibly artistic and ahead of their time. And some of them were incredibly basic and just not liked until there were the certain types of basic people who liked them 20 years later. Does that make them art? Under a certain definition that we've already discussed, it would make them art to those people. But under Wittgenstein's definition, maybe not. Lone Wolf says, my stupid 8-hour ESO, is that Elder Scrolls Online stream, could be considered art? And probably could. It depends. What were you singing at the time? Casual Philosophy says, it's relevant that it's a copy because inherent properties aren't the only thing that's relevant. So this is what we're talking about earlier. So this is when we were talking about the copy of a piece of art. So if someone managed to paint a piece of art and did an exact replica, would it still be art? And I'd say that it probably is. It's just not original art. You know, if we were to play some Bach, right, or something like that, some music that's considered art, and people were to replicate it, it would still be artistic in nature, would it not? It's just not original art. It's not their art. It's someone else's art that you've managed to replicate. I mean, what's your thought on that, Dave? If you replicate someone else's art, does it stop it being art?
No, because art, there are properties to art that the experiencer can glean from a copy. If it has a lot of the same aesthetic properties and stuff like that, just because it's not the original artist, but merely a copy, still allows the person to gain some kind of experience from it.
Yeah.
It would only be bad if they claimed that it was the original artist who painted it and then went on to sell it for £2 million.
No, I agree. But then we're getting to the moral component there rather than the artistic component.
Yeah.
Yeah, no. So there you go. Carrying on. Sorry, we've got a load of comments, which is absolutely fantastic. I'm trying to keep up with them. Kimo says the original forgery or question posed by Thomas More is a minor part of his utopia. Lone Wolf says accidentalism is a real thing in art, though. The idea that the art piece was created as a spontaneous act and not intended to be art, nor created by an artist. I love accidental pieces. So, by that notion, right, Lone Wolf, I've already discussed how shit these pieces are, right? But let's just say, one day, through my scribbles of things that I do whilst I'm on stream, I one day produce something that actually happened to be of the quality of something like the Mona Lisa. Is that what you're referring to here by accidental pieces? Would it be art? I mean, I guess it would if it was that level of quality, you know. Me doodling right there is not art, and it definitely isn't art. I can't draw for the life of me. I wish I could. In the same way that I make really crap music, and that's why I stopped. But if I accidentally made a really good piece of music, or accidentally made a really good drawing just by doodling, and it just so happened that I went, oh wow, I've somehow done one of those, you know, pen drawings that you see on the internet where it looks like Will Smith. Yeah, I believe that you're right. Yeah, you don't necessarily need to intend art to be art in the first place. I'd agree with you there. It doesn't need to be intentionally a piece of art, but I think you'd realise it's a piece of art when you went, oh my god, I've just pen drawn Wittgenstein. Fucking hell. He also says, would you consider a violin made from human bones during wartime a piece of art? Do you treasure Nazi war art the same way the Nazis did? I mean, to be honest, give me a violin made of human bones, and in fact, make me a whole band of things made from human bones. I'd love that. I'd just replace my entire gym with a and there'd be no more streams. You'd just have me trying to learn how to play my bone instruments. That would be it. That would be the sci-fi show from now on. Right. Yeah, a couple of other comments, but I'll leave it for now. Dave, come on. Let's carry on with your slideshow.
Okay. So, art can be considered to be art because it has some family resemblance to this overall concept that we have of art. Like a game, we can point to it and go, that's a game, that's a game, that's a game, that's not a game, that's not a game, that's a game. We can kind of do the same with art. But there are still some, necessary properties that are in there. But at an individual experience, art is whatever somebody likes to that person. Yeah?
Yeah.
So, Periscope, he kind of agrees with Wittgenstein. He takes a similar approach. He argues that when we're looking for what art is, necessary and sufficient conditions aren't enough. Yeah, we're being too strict. When it comes to art, we need to work on a looser set of conditions. Some of the things that he says that we can say count towards something being art is that it's the product of skill, it's the product of creative imagination, it's considered beautiful, it expresses the point of view of an individual, and he's got about another 6 to 10 more. I didn't jot them all down because it didn't fit on the slide.
So where Lone Wolf says an accidental piece is like a rip in a bicycle seat that looks like an overgrown Ford or a broken window that when viewed has a lot of patterns and inspire recognition, would that fulfill what they're saying here?
No, I wouldn't say so. But he also thinks, like Wittgenstein, that art is whatever an individual thinks is art. If they look at something and go, wow, that's art. Artistic, accidental art can fall under that. So if you look at a rip and you think, wow, that looks so much like a bolt of lightning, that's pretty cool. It's got aesthetic properties. It inspires an aesthetic feeling. So you could still say that it's a kind of art, but not in the sense that is being used here, where it's the product of skill, the product of imagination. It doesn't express the view of an individual. It's not created for the sense of being art. But, if they consider it beautiful, they're having an aesthetic experience. Art, that's one of the features of art. So it doesn't fully qualify as art, but it would be art to that person.
Yeah, fair.
And Berescout also argues that we can't use something like paradigm to define what is art. So we can use family resemblance like Wittgenstein says, but we can't say it's part of a paradigm, because if you think about a film, it contains more than one kind of art in it. There's the musical score, the cinematography, the acting, the narrative plot, the writing. So that falls under several different paradigms in one. But it resembles art because it's a product of skill, it's a product of creative imagination. So family resemblance works better than, say, it falling under a particular paradigm.
Agreed.
And here's my kind of favorite one. So E.J. Bond argues that when it comes to art, the way we've been defining it so far has several pitfalls. When we consider art, there's a bunch of things that we can direct our attention to. One of the problems is that many aestheticians and philosophers of art, they kind of focus on one kind of art. So painting, music, film, poetry. And from that one work of art or that one type of art, they tend to try and apply that to other types of art. And that's why we'll always have these outliers that we can't actually define using necessary and sufficient conditions that give us the essence of what makes something art. And a lot of the time, and this goes back to a few things said in the chat, a lot of the time what aestheticians and philosophers of art are describing isn't art, it's successful art. It's what makes something good art, not what makes something art.
That's interesting, actually. My first question is, right, you know that exclamation mark, is that moving or have I drunk too much?
It's not moving.
Okay, cool. The second point, though, is around that whole successful art. And that's actually a really good way to separate it. Like, if you say art can be anything, but actually successful art is what we're talking about. The only problem there is, do you define successful art by what it's sold by? You know, that bed was sold for 2.2 million, right? And as far as I'm concerned, that's shit art that was sold to some wanker who had too much money to burn.
No, if you think about all those kind of necessary conditions that we were describing before, the more of those necessary conditions that are hit, the more successful the art is. How much it sells for means nothing. It's the quality of the experience, the artist's intention, how it looks, the skill that went into it, say word choice for poetry, palette choice for painting, actor choice for a film, the technical skill of the guitarist for a bit of music, you know, that kind of thing.
No, I mean, I'd agree that that's what should be regarded as successful art. I was just wondering if what it sold for happened to come into that calculation.
Only in the art world.
Yeah, I'm glad it doesn't necessarily come into it. So, from this, I mean, would we regard someone does something, right? And they say you should regard this as art. Should it actually be regarded as art just because someone says so?
It might not necessarily convince you, but to them it's art. If you perhaps learn more about that style of art, what goes into making it, what makes it good, like somebody who just watches comedies or listens to, I don't know, pop music, you know, like Rebecca Black 24 hours a day, they can say, you know, that I enjoy that. It's good. It's art to me. But perhaps when they started learning about the technical craft that goes into music, music theory or film theory, cinematography, all that kind of stuff, perhaps they'll begin to see other things as art and be convinced that other types are art. Like, there's a lot of people I know that wouldn't count horror movies as art, but I most certainly do. And I could probably convince some people that it's art.
I wouldn't count all horror movies as art.
No, but the idea of horror, the idea of a horror movie, again, there's this distinction between successful art and bad art.
Yeah, no, see, this is the bit that I think I'd probably get stuck on. I think this is probably my problem, actually. I would regard successful art as art, and anything that is not successful art as not art.
Okay, but how would you justify that?
From all the things that we've mentioned tonight that justify something as successful. You know, because I've always had these thoughts, Dave. You know me. I'm one of them people. No, but on a serious notion, like when we've talked about horror and things like that, there are things that make a good horror, and you and I have had this discussion, and we've actually come to an accord of the things that we agree make a good horror. We don't like the jump horrors. We like the ones that actually have the good story. We like the things that make us question what it is to even be human, and so on and so forth. And that's what makes a good horror. And if we're talking about successful art in the realm of horror, that is what makes a successful horror rather than a bog standard horror.
But they're still both horrors.
There definitely are still both horrors. I wouldn't say one is not horror.
No, so that's the same with art. So just because it's not successful art, it still comes under art.
No, and that's what I'm admitting to. I'm saying up until this point, what I have regarded as not art is actually just not successful art.
Not success. You could also say it's something like it's not art that's successful to you, but it might be successful to somebody else.
But looking at what we've discussed tonight, there is almost 2 points there, isn't there? There's the subjective success and an objective success.
There's the aesthetic experience, which would make an artwork successful to the viewer or the one who's consuming the art. But think of it in two separate ways. There's the non-cognitive element of art, where it's what we feel from it. It's the experience we have of it. It's the transcendental nature of the kind of experience of whatever it is we have in front of us, like a film or a story or a radio play. But there's also a cognitive element. There's understanding the skill that goes into it, the meaning behind it, the narrative, what you can glean from it. So there's two elements to art. So perhaps you could say successful art is not just what hits non-cognitively. It's not just the emotions that it evokes. But good art, successful art, also hits the cognitive elements.
The sort of art that you can appreciate even if you don't personally like.
At multiple levels, yeah.
To make it really basic, you can appreciate someone's guitar skill even if you don't like
even if you don't like the music.
Yeah.
Yeah. An example I'll give is Midsummer. I didn't particularly like that film. It wasn't something that struck home for me. But I can appreciate the beauty of it. The cinematography was fantastic. There were some pretty good horrific scenes in it. It used music well. There was some skill that went into it. It's just that my own experience of it wasn't wasn't something that I look for in a horror. I much prefer, if they're going to do a folk horror like that, I much prefer something like Wicker Man. And also, I've just seen Lone Wolf, and yes, the Toxic Avenger is real horror art. Trauma is amazing.
I need you both to say the Toxic Avenger is real horror art, or I need to leave. Okay, well, Dave has said it, and I've repeated what you've said. I've not seen the Toxic Avenger, so I will go watch the Toxic Avenger at some point, but you need to remind me about 9 times for me to actually do it, and then I'll probably agree with you anyway.
In a weird way, I'm actually looking forward to the reboot, although I think it might lose some of its quality.
Reboots tend to do that, though, don't they? Like, they modernize something, they make it a little bit better in certain ways, but you lose a little bit of the grit.
I think they're going to make it a bit more mainstream. It's going to lose that low budget trauma kind of guerrilla filmmaking quality that it has.
As Kimmo says, if it turns me on, it's benign erotica. If it turns you on, it's degenerate, filthy porn.
Yeah.
What happens if it turns us both on, Kimmo? You know,
you're a match.
Yeah, I haven't seen it. Sorry. I definitely have to see the original. But I mean, there's things that there are certain movies, like The Thing, right? It's one of the few things that I actually saw the original, and then I saw the new version. And I liked the new version because I saw the original. And the number of people that I've seen who have seen the new version and didn't like it. I mean, the new one was a prequel. I don't know if there's another new one above that. But the new one was a prequel to the original. And I think that with a lot of things, like sometimes... Look at Tron, right? Look at Tron. If you just watch the new Tron was shit. Right? The original, classic. Terrible if you watched it today for the first time. But classic at the time. So ahead of its time.
I'm so old, I saw that in the cinema.
Oh my god. And he wasn't even a teenager.
No, I was about 74.
But there are definitely certain movies along those lines that you do need to see the original to really appreciate them now. I mean, imagine if they brought out a never-ending story now. I can't imagine it'd be any good if you hadn't seen the original. I don't know, I could be wrong with that one. But definitely the Tron movies, like watching the sequel now without seeing the original, definitely awful.
Any more comments to go?
Kimmo says, if what turns me on also turns you on, you could likely reconsider some life choices you've made or are about to make. Yes, my wife might be disappointed, but, you know.
Say no more, Gav.
Where do you live? Because if it's somewhere warm, I'm with you. Especially if you have a pool, all right?
Okay, so next slide. So what Bond argues is that the way that philosophers have gone about trying to define art previously, they've done it in an erroneous way. They've looked at it as there's this overall category of art, and they've been trying to look for properties in each piece of art that make it fit into that category. When what it actually should be is that art is the genus. It's not the species, it's the genus. And music, poetry, painting, they're all species of art. So what makes something a good painting is different to what makes something art.
Yeah.
Yeah, so what makes something art is simply that it falls into a category of a type of art. So a painting is a type of art. It might not necessarily be a good painting, but it's still art.
Yeah, I suppose you're broadening the definition there, aren't you, of what is art to things that fit categories of art.
Yeah, art is the species that all arts belong to. So you know, interpretive dance.
Finger painting.
Yeah. Finger painting is still painting.
A form of art because it's a form of painting, and painting is a form of art. But does it fit the parameters of good art, or, as you mentioned earlier, successful art?
Yeah, and I mean, if you think about art class, that's what you learn. You learn painting, drawing, sketching. If you think of dance, ballet, modern dance, all these things still fall under a form of arts. I mean, you could have a ballet performed by 6-year-olds as a recital. It might not be good, but it's still
ballet
art. Yeah,
and ballet is art. Yes.
Yeah. So Bond gives us a bunch of categories that we can look at to see whether something falls into something that could be considered a species of art. And by separating them this way, we can sort of come up with different ways of evaluating what makes them good. So we shouldn't expect what makes a song a good song to apply to what makes a novel a good novel, because they're not the same thing. They might both be a type of art, but they're not the same type of art.
But what about text on a screen, like digital text on a screen? Would we regard that as digital art? Like right now, right? What you've got there on the screen, it's formulated. It's got a background that's supposed to look like that slightly perforated paper that would generally be used for painting. They've got some pencils there. Those pencils look like they're painted pencils, and you've got text over it. We could say that there is a certain artistic quality to what you're presenting on screen right now.
Artistic or aesthetic?
Yes.
They're designed to be pleasing, but they're not designed to be art.
So
there's an aesthetic experience, but I haven't created them to be art. I've just created them to be pleasing to look at while I impart the information that's on them.
So from like a company logo perspective, then, would we regard any company logo as art when generally they're as basic as this, if not as like more basic than this? I mean, you think about the BP logo, they're literally a BP that's a color on a white background. Would they be art?
I would say so, because they're usually created by an artist or a designer to not only be pleasing to the eye, but to impart a specific sort of feeling. They're created to be associated with a particular, not artist, but company. I think there's a lot of things that give them the quality of being an artwork. Some are just scribbles, of course, some are just purely functional, but some are actually, you think of the Apple logo. It's created to give a particular experience, to be related to a particular company.
Yeah, sure. But I mean, there's actually a picture of an apple. It's not just the letters B
with a bite taken
P,
out of it.
Yeah. But I mean, it's like the BP logo. I remember when that was first reformatted, and it was just suddenly reformatted to a lowercase BP. And I think it was a green BP on a white background or something like that. Or it might have been a blue BP on a white background. And I looked at it and went, really? And then, I mean, I was a child at the time. And my stepdad told me that it cost over £1 million to get that through. And I went, what? I could have done that. How the hell did they pay £1 million for that? How can this be regarded as artistic? And I find that with a lot of logo graphic design. Yeah, and I know they have certain things to uphold. But and I know the BP logo has changed. They've now got that sort of flower thing that goes along with it. But there was a time where it was literally just that lowercase BP in blue or green or something like that. And it was like, what? why is that worth £1 million? And it annoyed me. And the fact that that could be considered art, it still annoys me. And, okay, I'll gladly take the definition of successful art, and it's not successful art, but it's still art that cost over £1 million.
They were hired to perform a specific task. They went to people that was considered the best. They weren't paying for the artwork. They were paying for the creative minds behind it.
I don't like it.
So Bond gives us this set of criteria for determining if something is an art form. So this might help with deciding whether or not the BP logo belongs to an art form. So the first he puts is the form itself comprehends the product of intentional human activity and being identical to human activity in some cases. So in other words, it understands that it is the product of some human creating this thing to be intentionally a work of art, and belonging to a particular type of art. So accidental art might not fit in here because it's not the product of an intentional human activity. And when it says being identical to human activity in some cases, if you think of interpretive dance, the interpretive dance is the art form itself. The creation of it is the thing itself. Or acting. The actor isn't creating something. The actor is the artwork, especially when it comes to a good actor. He's the one who makes you feel like the actor is not the character. They are two completely different people.
Yeah.
Yeah, does that make sense?
Yeah. I mean, a good actor will be the character. They are two different people.
Yeah, that's it. I mean, you're watching the actor by the way he looks and whatnot. But you still feel like you're taken along for the ride with what the actor is doing, and you can sense the emotions coming from the character, not the actor, that kind of thing. Okay, so products within that form are, or may be, characteristically intended to have value as objects of experience for an actual or possible audience in virtue of certain properties that they possess. So in other words, it's being created to be experienced by somebody, and created to have aesthetic value or some kind of meaning, or it's intended to have a relationship with the one who consumes the art. Yeah?
Yep.
The products are valuable to their users primarily, but not exclusively, as objects of experience in virtue of certain properties that they possess. So, in other words, the person who is taking them in finds them valuable, and finds them to have a certain level of experience that they enjoy and value. So, a good comedy is something created to make the person laugh. It makes the person laugh. They find it valuable for making them laugh, increasing their mood, that kind of stuff. So it has to fulfill something like that. Or somebody looking at a painting, it should be created to make somebody feel disgust, pleasure, beauty, that kind of thing. Within the form itself, there's the opportunity for the exercise of skill, technique, and craft. There is opportunity for creative imagination within the form. Products within that form can have a human meaning or significance beyond the mere surface or decorative properties. So a good horror film isn't just blood and guts. It's, there's meaning behind it in some cases.
I'd agree. I mean, we've had that discussion a number of times about the jump horrors and the gornos.
Yeah, exactly. Products within taste, discrimination, and serious critical judgment can be exercised upon the products of the form. So, you can evaluate the skill that's gone into it. You can evaluate the way it looks, all that kind of stuff. So that's how we would define something as belonging to a species of art.
Mm-hmm. I think I'd agree with that. There's enough there to sort of make it something that is art. When we come to something like unintentional art, I agree that something can be unintentionally artistic, but I don't necessarily think that makes it art. In the same way that you could describe something as atheistic, but it's not necessarily an atheist. So yeah, I mean, this seems like a pretty rounded view of art, if I'm honest.
And then within each species, there are certain necessary and sufficient conditions to go into what makes it, successful or good art.
I mean, if you went into some form of music and they were just painting yellow on a blackboard, that wouldn't make it music. And you'd go, no, that's not music. How can you regard this as music?
Yeah. And according to Bond, a species of art doesn't necessarily have to hit all these notes. It's just they get closer to being art the more of these that they hit. So if you hit all of them, it is definitely art. But if you only hit, say, half of them, then you could say it's still a kind of subspecies of art. It's just on the periphery of being art.
Right, yeah. So it could be something that is regarded as not necessarily art.
Think of something like maybe not fine art, but still art?
Yeah. I'm still trying to think about how we can get things like, you know, some of the really basic abstract art to actually fit the parameters of art, because I still don't think that it does.
It's the product of intentional human activity. It's intended to have value. They're valuable to some of the users. Like, just because you don't enjoy abstract art doesn't necessarily mean that those who use it don't enjoy it. And there's exercise of skill, technique, and craft. There's creative imagination involved, and taste and critical judgment can be employed upon them based on Kendall Walton's categories of art.
Yeah, that's fair. I still think, loosely speaking, some of the like abstract art, like that one where there is literally just two squares on a page of different colors, contrasting colors. It's just like a really, really. But I get what you're saying. It's just one of those things that I don't think will ever sit well with me. I'm not saying all abstract art, right? I'm not saying all abstract art. I am saying there are certain pieces of abstract art that I sit there and I go, what the fuck?
Which is fine, because again, like Wittgenstein and Kaut says, there is still a subjective aesthetic, non-cognitive element to art, and it might put you off. You might not enjoy it. You might not get the cognitive elements. So it won't be art to you, because you employ different taste, different critical judgment. But it still falls under the category of art.
So we've actually got a few comments that have come in. So I do apologise for not keeping up in the last little bit.
Well, I think that's it for this anyway.
Awesome. Brilliant says advertisement is art, or advertisement is art. Surely it depends. Like, I don't think every advertisement counts as art.
I think you can say that there's a certain skill to it, certain creative imagination and that kind of thing, so it could fall under a species of art. I mean, but like you say, not all art is somebody reading out 5 lines from a script on the radio to say, go to Cheltenham Motors for your repairs. Not necessarily could consider that one art.
No. Check out answersinreason.com. That's answers-in-reason.com. Is that art? Because that's advertisement to our website, and I don't think that was art. So there you go. Perhaps you mean good advertisement is art, and I'd probably agree with you, because good advertisement could be artistic. Kimo says, it doesn't seem sensible to evaluate the lively arts by the same standards you'd review plastic arts. And I think that's basically what you were saying earlier, Dave. Like, there are different types of art.
Yeah, separated into different species of art, because different standards and tastes and critiques would apply to different kinds. Like, we talk about this with Kendall Walton's categories of art, where if you turned around to say the Mona Lisa doesn't move at 24 frames a second, so it's a terrible animation, you know, there's a very different criticism for animation than there is for a painting. So yeah, I completely agree.
Yeah, and you're right. It's a terrible animation. It's not supposed to be an animation.
It's not supposed to be, yeah. That's why you can have objective judgments about the beauty of particular types of art. Even if there's still a subjective, non-cognitive element to it.
Lone Wolf says, now you're asking if NFTs can be art. That whole idea of the digital fungible token is exactly what you're describing, and that the art wants you to think it is art. Yeah, can NFTs be art? No.
Is it the NFT just the blockchain rather than the actual artwork.
Yeah, and that's what I was saying. The NFT can't be art. The thing that it's representing, sure. But the actual NFT itself, no. Well, unless I'm completely mistaken and I've got my understanding of what NFTs are completely wrong. And that's entirely possible because, I'm wrong a lot. So please feel free to correct me there.
I don't know very much about it except that a bunch of people got ripped off by monkey photos that I meant to put in with the slides.
Brilliant says the NFT supplier would make you think it's art, but in reality it's just your queue number. So I think that backs up what we've just said there. The NFT itself isn't art, it's just the number that represents the art. And also says you have experience with the Far East. There are many examples in Taiwan of English letters being used as art. Look how popular the name tattoo has become over here. Yeah, and actually there are people who get tattoos of things that say things like soup because they think it means something really deep. And when they finally realise that this deep tattoo that they've got actually just means soup, it loses its power. So there's still obviously an artistic quality to the lettering and to the delivery of the tattoo. But there's also the meaning behind the tattoo. And once they realise the meaning behind the tattoo isn't what they first thought, it stops being art to them, right? So even though there's an artistic quality to the lettering, it's no longer art to the person who has had the tattoo because it was supposed to mean explanatory or intelligence or universe or, I don't know, one of those things that people get as tattoos. I don't know. I don't have any. And what it means is soup. And yeah, it loses all its power. Of course it would. Especially if you have that just written in English, soup. Because it's lost its intent. So yeah, I agree. There's an intentional quality there. Lone Wolf says, I'm so glad I'm not the only one that suffers these kind of darn link bots. Yeah, do you know what? Tonight is the first night we've had them come on the stream. I get them in the comments.
No, we
YouTube.
had some last week that I removed.
Did we? Oh, I didn't see them last week. Does that mean I'm more sober this week than last week? That's crazy. I don't believe that to be true at all. Kimmo says, inscription, particularly calligraphy and typefaces, are particularly artistically important to many who make or just enjoy them. So that's sort of going along the lines of what I said before with the tattoo thing. There's a certain artistic quality to getting the tattoo. Calligraphy is something that definitely has an artistic quality, especially if done well. But there's generally the intent there. But equally, the calligraphy, I mean, if you imagine that calligraphy was just writing the word soup, it would be done in an artistic way, but it wouldn't necessarily be art. If someone did calligraphy across my chest and it just said soup, it would be an artistic take on the word soup, rather than being a piece of art. I mean, that's my take on it. Is that sort of where you rest on that?
I think calligraphy can be considered a species of art because it hits a lot of the notes. Might not be art to the person because, like you said, they attach a meaning to it, and the meaning is part of the art itself. And once it loses that meaning, it's no longer art to them. But if you think about the skill for good calligraphy, the aesthetic nature of it, how pleasing it looks, it's intended to be pleasing. So I think it hits a lot of the notes that Bond talks about.
Yeah, that's fair. We've got a question from Lone Wolf that says, do we know of any other species on Earth that has the capability to appreciate art? I'm going to go with a memory that's a distant memory, and I'm going to have to look on YouTube later to verify. But I remember, I think it was a chimpanzee being shown a picture that they loved and were just like, ah, and they hugged. But outside of apes, I don't think there are any forms of apes that appreciate art. I might even be wrong about this chimpanzee. It might have been something unrelated. It could have been a picture of, I don't know, their child or something like that, and they appreciated a picture of their child. But I seem to remember watching a program where a chimpanzee appreciated this picture that they had been given. I'm sure it was something that had been drawn, and they were like, and they hugged it. But memories can be incredibly distorted, and I couldn't put my finger on it. So please take that with a pinch of salt. I'd love to look into that though. That particular question. You know, are there any other species that appreciate any form of art? A good one, because we obviously know that there are things like elephants appreciate death. You know, they have graveyards, they mourn their dead, and things like that. There are, you know, various apes use tools, and even have certain ritualistic behavior. So how many of the species out there in the world appreciate art? I'm sure there've got to be, even if it's rudimentary, some that have a level of appreciation. But I'm not well versed in the topic enough to answer that right now. Oh, I've got a pen. I am going to write that down. I'm going to write it down there.
I don't know if he's appreciating them, but our dog, it watches a lot of horror movies with me. He'll sit at the end of the bed and just stare at the screen and watch them.
How many times does he destroy the air quality during that?
Well, he farts a lot anyway, so...
No more than usual, or
No more than usual.
Okay. So there's no way to tell if that's what he's doing. Verillion says, would animals like elephants and apes painting be classified as art? So there is... I don't know if they do it off of their own back, but obviously when they get shown how to do it in a captive environment, they learn how to do art. So would it actually be classified as art, Dave? It's a sort of mimicry of the skill that they've learned. But then, isn't that what anyone who does art does? Oh, I think we've lost you. I'm asking you a question and we've lost you. Oh, you're back. Oh, I think you're gone again. Okay. So I'll say Verillion. I don't know if it would be. There is obviously the part where they're not intending it to be art because they don't understand that concept. But if they understand what they're doing, then maybe they could be regarding that as art. Kimo says it's a stretch, but there are some animals who seem to have predictable responses to varying types of music. And that's very much true. No, there are lots of animals. In fact, if any of you are friends with me on Facebook, there's an owl that I shared the other day. Now, Mexicans tend to view owls as witches, and they were trying to scare this owl away with music. And this owl, whilst they were singing at it, started boogieing like this and really got into the groove, doing all the head movements that owls can do because their heads are fucking weird. So yeah, from that perspective, it was great to see. Oh, you love splatter art, do you, Lone Wolf? I think it depends. I think I'm particular about the sort of stuff I see that is splatter art. I think some of it is an excuse to just splatter paint everywhere. And some of it is fucking cool. To tie in with your point earlier, Dave, yeah, the Mona Lisa is an absolutely terrible animation. And yet you're right. If you're judging it in that realm, and that's one of the points that we made in our previous stream about can beauty be objective? Because if you're judging something like the Mona Lisa as an animation, then of course it's a crap animation. So there are certain qualities of something that makes something a beautiful animation, even if you don't necessarily like animation. And that was the sort of thing that we were going with the qualities of there. We can obviously, there are objective standards to art, and there are things that don't necessarily have a standard, at least yet, that are art. So yeah. Brilliant says, yeah, the Mona Lisa's definitely bad to listen to. And Kimo says, yeah, it doesn't play properly on a turntable. Brilliant. There's a load of comments coming through there, and to be honest, yeah, you're right, Lone Wolf. He did freeze mid screen share. I mean, Dave, come on, sort it out. Are you back yet?
No.
But yeah. So yeah, art. It's an interesting one. It's an interesting one to think about.
Yeah, to be honest, I know a lot of people wouldn't be interested in this, but it's the kind of stuff that really interests me.
Mm.
I think it's kind of fascinating because it also gives insight into very...
Oh, Dave. You'll find me back and you'll die again.
So the thing is...
Are you back yet, Dave?
No.
I don't know what's happened to your connection tonight.
No, I don't.
I'd like to say hello to Godless Granny. Great to see you. I hope you're doing well. Looking forward to you seeing the responses to some of the questions for atheists. You're in quite a few of them because you have given some really good answers. If anyone hasn't checked out Godless Granny's channel, it's definitely one of those ones worth checking out. Very different perspective from a lot of the online atheists that I see. Different from mine as well. Very different from mine. Because we come from very different worlds, but still one that's very well thought out and worth checking out. So yeah, props to you, Godless Granny. Lone Wolf says art and religion tie together historically speaking. Yeah, I'd say that. I mean, I'd say historically speaking, things tie together quite religiously. I mean, there is a lot about the past that sort of ties together. If you look at history, you've got all of the art and the religion and all the culture and everything like that. It all tells a story about the past. That is one of the things about history that's kind of interesting. You know, I mean, at school, I hated history because I could never remember the dates. I loved the stories, couldn't remember the dates. But there is still all of that is absolutely great. So, yeah, I think, you know, there's a lot that we can learn from history, and there's a lot that we can learn from religion as well. And there's a lot that we can learn from art, and you tie them all together. And yeah, no, I'm with you there. There is that tie. And Kimmo says nowadays people's aesthetic preferences get correlated. I suppose that's supposed to say correlated into views about racism and homophobia. You can't date or like who you like. That's a really interesting take. I don't necessarily think that your aesthetic preferences necessarily have to. If you were to say you preferred people who looked a certain way or with a certain skin tone, I don't think having a preference makes you racist. I think if you were to say things like certain of a skin tone are crap because they're of that skin tone, that would make you racist. You know, a preference doesn't make you racist. You know, I prefer fillet steak over lamb. That doesn't mean I hate lamb. And you know, within your sexual preferences, you can't control those. That doesn't make you racist, right? It's just if you hate someone because of their color, and that's what bigotry is. It's hate based on those certain things. So no, I don't think your aesthetic preferences can make you a racist or a homophobic. You know, I wouldn't want to have sex with another man. That doesn't mean I'm homophobic. I don't have a problem with other men having sex with other men. I wouldn't want to watch it personally, right? But I like watching two ladies do it, right? That doesn't mean I'm homophobic. I've got a preference. So I'm not sure how you can say that someone's aesthetic preferences can get correlated that way. If someone takes it that way, I think that's more on them. They're looking for a reason to dick on you for no decent reason. No, Manny, there's no NFT reveal. Should there be, though? I mean, could we make money out of this? Because, you know, right now we lose money. So if we could do an NFT reveal and, you know, it would pay the server costs, maybe that's what we should do.
The way to make money off NFTs is to have the server, put the blockchains, get it all set up, get people to fund it, and then switch the server off and run away with the money.
Sold. That sounds awfully immoral, though. I don't like it. Is what you're saying NFTs are immoral, Dave?
They're vaporware.
Okay, so Kimmo clarified, says, I meant coralled in the sense of being put into a coral enclosure.
Corralled.
Corralled. Okay. The word says coral, though. But fair. I get obtuse from time to time. Yes, well, there's nothing wrong with being a bit obtuse, as long as you don't become oblong. I reckon oblong is only one of those words that appears in UK primary schools. But it's a brilliant word. Oblong. How many of you out there know the word oblong and know what I mean by oblong without Googling? Lone Wolf reckons NFTs are amoral. Not unmoral or non-moral, they're amoral.
Well, they're just objects. It's how they're used.
So wouldn't that make them non-moral then?
You could say that, yeah.
But people's use of it could be somewhere between. So Dave, ultimately, with the whole art thing, because I know we're approaching the end of the night, what would you say that your main requirements for something to be considered art are?
I generally tend to go with Bond, where it's the product of a skillful activity. It has certain value to those who appreciate it. It's creative imagination that goes into it. That kind of thing. But I also think art can be art to someone that isn't art to somebody else. So there's, to fully appreciate it, there's cognitive and non-cognitive elements. But you only really need the non-cognitive element of appreciating it for the experience that it is, for it to be art for the individual.
So there's a non-cognitive
and there's a difference
element
between good art and bad art.
So there's the non-cognitive element which makes something art, but there's the cognitive element which makes it good art, would you say?
Good art. Yeah.
That's interesting.
There's a certain level of appreciation that makes it a better experience and better art.
Sort of
but, doodling a stick man could be considered art to somebody who enjoys stick man.
Yeah. Oh, no, that's fair. Just thinking you could probably apply that back to morality. Non-cognitive approaches to sort of describe aspects of morality, but not particularly good ones. I'm being a dick, of course, but that's because I am. It's interesting. It definitely gives me something more to think on. I like the split between something that is not good art and good art, or should we say art and good art. The minimum requirement for something to be art and things that is successful art, and we're not regarding successful art in something that is sold for a lot of money, because yes, it's successful as a product, but it's not necessarily successful as art, because a product, you could say a pair of trainers that fall apart within 2 weeks that sold for a lot of money was a successful product, but isn't successful as a pair of trainers, because trainers are supposed to last more than a couple of weeks. And it's the same sort of thing with art. It could be successful as a product, it's sold for a lot of money, but it's not successful in the realms of art. It doesn't evoke all the qualities of what something that is good art is. Yeah, it's sold for a lot of money, but so what? Lone Wolf also says, I have real personal attachment to the item for it to be art for me. My father's paintings are art to me, but to no one else. But it's different from my first issue signed copy of The Max.
I consider Viz to be art, but not a lot of people do.
The magazine?
Yeah, the comic. It takes skill. There's messages imparted. It's humorous. There's a nice, pleasing element to it for me, probably for a lot of other people. But someone who's kind of snobby about art probably wouldn't see it as art. Even though going by Bond's categories, it could fit into some species of art.
I mean, I think, comic books, a lot of comic books could be regarded as art, couldn't they? There is a lot of great
especially
artistic
a graphic
work.
novel.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Comic book, graphic novel, pretty much same difference in my head. I know there's a nuance, but, same difference. So yeah, it's interesting to find this line. So art is more generalistic. As you said earlier, it's more the genus. And then there's species of art. And then of the species, there's good and bad, basically, of the species, of each species. And that's the way we should view art. We should think of art in that more generalistic thing. Like, yeah, all of this is art. And what? What does that really mean? Cool. All of it's art. Let's not argue about it being art. It's the sort of thing like the evidence conversation. Let's not say this is not evidence. Let's analyze this evidence and see if it's good evidence. Let's not say this is not art. Let's analyze it and see if it is good art. Yeah. Let's put it in those ideas. I think that's a much better way of doing it.
And we generally do with most topics. We, like political theories, we have various different types of political theories that are species of political theory.
We don't say it's not politics or political theory.
Yeah, exactly. Because it only hits some of the notes, or because some people don't find it political theory, or because, say, an academic might not find it political theory. We just seem to look at art in a different way for some reason.
Yeah. I wonder why, though. Because when you actually peel it back, it's no different, really.
Than anything else, yeah.
No. So I do wonder why. Maybe it's because it is a bit broader. Because it hits so many different notes. Because you have, visual and audible, and when you get into the visual, you get the still, you get the real life, and you get the abstract, and you get the animated, and it's so separated from one to another. And you take something like abstract art, and then you get sort of like animated real life, and and yeah.
I mean, think of animation. We don't say something isn't animation because it doesn't fit the standards of Disney.
No.
We have anime, which is a very different style, but we still consider it animation because there are certain necessary and sufficient conditions that make it animation. And then we judge each one. We don't judge anime according to The Simpsons or Family Guy or Snow White. We judge anime according to other types of anime and the skill of other anime creators. And the same with Disney. We judge Aladdin 2 according to Aladdin.
Yeah.
Not according to Family Guy or The Simpsons.
Let's not talk about Aladdin 2.
I never watched it.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I stopped at 1 because Dan Castellaneta as the genie just didn't sound right.
No, but then on the third one, it reverted back to Robin Williams.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah. So, they realised how bad it didn't work in the second one, and they went, no, we need you back in the third one. So, no, you were right. It really didn't work as him in the second one. That was a very good guess on your part. There are a couple of chats. So the graphic novel is whole arc. So this is talking about the Max. The comic is just one episodic component of the overall arc. So it was talking about that it's a limited run comic. So Lone Wolf also says that I think what we're all saying is that art evolves with humanity for very good reasons, because humanity is constantly evolving along with all of our understandings. And I think that's fair to say. And as art has evolved, there have become different objective standards within art. You know, like we're saying, with still life and with animation and so on and so forth, there are still different forms of art. And in the future, there may be other types of art that crop up that we realize are art that we, you know, will blow our minds of if we were to think about them today. And just because something is something that we humans have created doesn't mean that there isn't any objectivity to it. So there is an objective standard to different types of art, but there is a more subjective element of whatever art is in and of itself. And that was the biggest takeaway that I took from tonight. You know, what is art is subjective. What is good art is less so. Especially when it comes into the type of art, you know, the category of art. That is far more objective than the question of what is art. Cave paintings, art or history? Yes. That's my answer. How about you, Dave?
I'd say it's both, yeah. Because, you know, it's a means of communication. It's skillful, especially for the time, but they're also part of history. It's like the Mona Lisa. It's art, but it's part of history.
Yeah, most definitely. Lone Wolf also says that VR art is coming, so is AR art, so virtual reality and augmented reality art. I think we're almost seeing augmented reality art already. There's the augmented reality version of Minecraft where your world is the world around you and you can just build wherever you are over stuff. So if you don't like your neighbor and they, you know, they're not necessarily in the AR world of Minecraft, you can just, you know, build a penis over their house. And anyone that plays Minecraft can see that. So yeah, there is a certain level of AR art already happening. VR art, yeah, I can imagine that's definitely incoming. I mean, you could argue some of the games. I mean, you think about the game Superhot. You could argue that that's very artistic in itself anyway. Especially in its VR format. But even in its 2D format, it's quite artistic. I mean, it's very basic graphically, but there's more to it than just the graphics. So, yeah, no, I'm definitely with you there. Manny says, did you already talk about AI making art? No, we haven't addressed AI making art. And I think that would probably send the stream far too long anyway, Manny, because we've almost been going for 3 hours. And I have work tomorrow. I will say that it definitely would make a future discussion. I don't know about you, Dave.
Yeah, that's what I posted in the chat.
Oh,
I mean,
right.
according to Bond, it wouldn't fit the parameters of art, but maybe those parameters need to be expanded upon with the event of AI art.
Yeah. It might be a necessary addition. I mean, that's what we're talking about in the future. As we've evolved as a species, art has evolved, and our understanding of art has evolved, and our parameters of art has evolved. So maybe one day VR or AI art would be regarded as art. Lone Wolf, no, that's not what I have been doing with Minecraft AR. It's what I've considered doing with Minecraft AR, but I hate Minecraft that much that I refuse to do it. But it's what I've decided that if I could ever be bothered to do it, that's the sort of thing I would do, because I'm a bit of a prick. And there you go. Awesome. Dave, is there anything you want to leave us tonight before we sign off?
No, it was a fun stream. Thank you to everyone who joined in and joined the chat and listened to me blabber on for a while. Hopefully it was at least reasonably interesting.
Well, I definitely learned something and definitely considered things from a different angle. I will now talk about that particular, logo that happens to be someone's new work logo that may or may not be the company I work for, that they say should be regarded as art. I'll go, yeah, it's art. It's just shit. Sorry, that's not the right way to pronounce it. Unsuccessful art. There you go. It's unsuccessful art. But no, thank you very much for that, Dave. I really enjoyed the stream. I definitely learned something. Definitely thought about things in a different way, and that's what I like from these streams, is just the ability to think about things in a different way, and noticing how my thoughts change on the topic over the next couple of weeks, even if they don't change immediately. So thank you for that. And yes, as Dave said, thank you everybody who's tuned in, especially those of you who have joined the chat and spoke up and asked questions and made statements. A doubly thank you to any one of you who's made me laugh tonight as well. You know who you are. So you've been watching the Fresh Air Sci-Fi Show. We've been discussing what is art, and I'm Joe.
And I'm Dave.
Have a good night, all.
Good night, everyone.